This video is brought to you by Opera. Hey Wisecrack, Jared here. Let me ask you something. If you had the chance to wipe out the worst thing that ever happened to you, to make it so that you had no memory of the event at all, would you do it? Or, more importantly, should you? These are the questions at the heart of today's movie, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. First released in 2004, this lasting film opened to rave reviews. Charmed by innovative cinematography, unusual structure, and an all-star cast, critics and audiences alike fell in love with this quirky, haunting story about the nature of human relationships and heartbreak. But after 16 years, does the movie hold up? Was Kate Winslet just lucky enough to cash in on the manic pixie dream girl phenomenon before it got stale? Or is there something really profound about the relationship she and Jim Carrey portray on the screen? To answer this question, we have to get to know the uncredited star of this movie, the human brain. Specifically, we're going to look to neuroscience to examine what this film says about the way the brain works and what that means for us as human beings living with those brains. Sound complicated?
Damn it, Smithers! This isn't rocket science, it's brain surgery!
Don't worry, we'll break it down for you in this Wisecrack Edition on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Deep or Dumb. And spoilers ahead for one of the few movies ever to put Frodo Baggins and the Hulk in the same room.
Never really had much luck with the ladies.
Maybe if you stop stealing their panties.
But before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, Opera. We're all online a lot these days, so why not have the best browsing experience possible? Opera is the all-in-one browser that gives you features to connect to your favorite platforms and make your time online more productive. For starters, you can design the way you want your browser to look and organize all your tabs. There's also Workspace, a feature that allows you to create and customize the way your tabs are saved for optimal workflow. Opera also features integrated messengers, so you can access Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and Telegram all on the side, so you don't have to check every app individually. While browsing, you can watch videos from Netflix, YouTube, or almost any other video provider with the browser's video pop-out tool. They even offer a built-in VPN and ad blocker, which saves you the headache of downloading extensions and keeping track of subscriptions. Opera includes all this and more, which you can check out for yourself by downloading the browser today. You can download Opera for free by clicking the link in the description. Once you've downloaded it, let us know what your favorite feature is. If you're watching on mobile, you can still click the link in the description to download later, so make sure you use our link. And now, back to the show. Alright guys, let's do a quick recap. Sad sack Joel Barish wakes up one day to find a huge scratch on his car and most of his journal entries missing. On a whim, he ditches his usual commute and hops on a train to Montauk, where he meets and starts to fall in love with the quirky and impulsive Clementine Krasinski. After some jumping back and forth on the timeline, we discover that Joel and Clementine have actually met before. In fact, they've had a whole life together, dating for what appears to have been several years. Neither lover recognizes the other because they independently arranged to have their memories of the painful relationship erased by a company called Lacuna Inc. The film cuts between Joel's bedroom, where Lacuna technicians are working to wipe memories of Clementine from his brain, and the inside of his head as he changes his mind about the procedure and fights to keep those memories safe. While Joel and Clementine do ultimately lose their memories of each other, they manage to retain a vague impression of their feelings, which sends them to Montauk at the same time. At the end of the film, it's heavily implied that the whole cycle of their relationship will begin again. To discern whether the film is deep or not, we need to dive into some philosophical and ethical questions about the proper use of technology and our innate human abilities when it comes to building our identities, selves, and experiences. At a very basic level, the movie's plot is driven by Joel's choices about what to do with his brain. That is, whether or not to eliminate Clementine from his consciousness. He starts off wanting to alter his brain, even to the point of harming it in order to avoid the pain of having loved and lost Clementine.
Is there any risk of brain damage?
Well, technically speaking, the procedure is brain damage, but it's on a par with a night of heavy drinking. Nothing you'll miss.
But as he goes through the night and starts to realize what losing Clementine really means, the eradication of a huge part of his life and emotional experience, he makes a choice to fight the procedure and preserve as much of her as he can, pain and all.
I want to call it off.
Joel's decisions boil down to a choice between comfort and growth. He can live a diminished but easy life without Clementine, or opt for a harder but richer experience with her in it. But this is also a choice between two ways of approaching his physical brain, either as something to be trimmed down and controlled for the sake of efficiency, or as something to be used for its full, messy potential, whatever the consequences of that growth and freedom might be. Philosopher Catherine Malibu has written about this exact dilemma in her conveniently titled book, What Should We Do With Our Brain? The book draws on neuroscientific research to discuss the concept of the brain's plasticity. When we say plasticity, many of us are actually thinking about the far more limited and nefarious concept of flexibility. Plasticity involves adaptation, and according to Malibu, is an agency of disobedience to every constituted form, a refusal to submit to a model. To be flexible is to receive a form or impression, to be docile, to not explode. Put it another way, research and experience show that our brains are able to both adapt to circumstances and resist them, to work with change and to create it. To borrow Malibu's analogy, our selves are like plastic explosives, able to mold to a given shape if necessary, but also capable of radically changing our own form and that of our environment. Flexibility, on the other hand, involves always taking the path of least resistance. Looked at from this point of view, Joel's decision to erase or keep his memories of Clementine can be seen as a choice between exercising the full plasticity of his brain or doing the flexible thing by destroying those parts of his brain that are making him uncomfortable. In both Malibu's book and Eternal Sunshine, flexibility is presented as the guiding philosophy of neoliberal capitalism. According to both texts, we live in an economic system that demands flexibility from its actors and offers them products and services which will increase their flexibility for a price. Eternal Sunshine, perhaps simplistically, portrays business as the process of taking advantage of people who are suffering from confusion or pain. Joel's very first lines frame Valentine's Day as a corporate plot to sabotage our emotional state.
Today is a holiday invented by greeting card companies to make people feel like crap.
But the film ultimately earns that critique. Keeping with the same theme, the movie makes it clear that Lacuna Inc. survives by profiting off of people's desire to rid those crappy feelings of heartache. As Mary points out,
I told him pre-Valentine's Day is our busy time.
That's okay.
It's even implied that clients may become dependent on the memory erasing procedure over time and will go to extreme lengths to get it done.
No, I'm sorry, Miss Simon. You can't have the procedure done 3 times in 1 month.
The ways in which the company takes advantage of compromised people become less subtle and more disturbing as the film progresses. Shortly after arriving at Joel's apartment, the Lacuna Inc. technicians assigned to wipe his memories turn his home into their own personal Airbnb, drinking, getting high, and even having sex near his unconscious body. This trend takes a turn for the seriously up when we learn that one of the technicians stole a pair of Clementine's underwear while they were erasing her memory.
I mean, they were clean and all.
And that he's been using information stolen from Joel's letters to try and trick her into falling in love with him. The unethical behavior reaches its climax when we find out that Howard coerced Mary, his own secretary, to wipe her memory after the two of them had an affair together.
Oh, Howie, I can't do this.
We agreed it's for the best.
What Joel, Clementine, and Lacuna's other customers lack that leaves them open to such exploitation is the flexibility that society demands of them. Such a demand, according to Malibu, is at odds with our true nature as human beings. As beings with plastic brains, we can indeed bend when we wish, but we're also capable of resistance, creation, and other acts of free will in the face of obstacles. Too often, though, in a culture so tightly focused on work and productivity, the full plasticity of our brains is reduced to the concept of flexibility and presented simply as the possibility of increasing or decreasing performance. Very often, the brain is analyzed as personal capital. This idea of the brain as personal capital, something you can optimize and invest in for greater output, like a factory production line, is even more prevalent today than when Malibu first wrote about it in 2008. In Silicon Valley and beyond, we find workers taking drastic steps to alter their brain functioning for improved performance on the job. Workers engage in so-called brain hacking practices, fine-tune sleep and break schedules, the use of nootropics, and even LSD microdosing in an attempt to put in longer hours and produce more work, whether or not this serves their own health, well-being, or growth. These practices and others are examples of Malibu's flexibility in action. Hijacking your own brain chemistry to meet an unreasonable deadline demonstrates a profound ability and willingness to adapt to circumstances rather than improve them. From an economic perspective, then, to be flexible is to upskill, reorient, and change as often as necessary to satisfy the demands of society, rather than take the drastic action of trying to change those demands. Lacuna Inc. promises its customers the flexibility that is so highly prized in our society and economy. Without their procedures done, Dr. Hauer's patients are inflexible, fixated on past lovers, dead pets, or any of the countless disappointments and setbacks that are part of being human. He explains his service to Joel as a way for people to become unstuck, not by overcoming the challenges they face.
Ms. Kraczynski was not happy, and she wanted to move on. we provide that possibility.
but by smoothing out their lives so they can continue forward uninterrupted.
When you awake in the morning, you find yourself in your own bed as if nothing had happened.
In her discussion of mood-regulating drugs like Prozac, Malibu claims that our society commonly judges such treatments based on their ability to reduce vulnerability, chronic disturbance, and psychical precariousness, and give back the appetite for mobility, the capacity to rid oneself of rigidity and of fixity in one's identity. In other words, we say that a psychiatric drug or treatment is working when it makes the person using it more flexible in their approach to work, relationships, etc. Now, this is not to say that Malibu is against such medication. On the contrary, she makes a point of saying how useful it can be. She's simply pointing out that the discourse around the effectiveness of psychiatric medication tends to focus on whether it makes the person more pliable, productive, and eager to fit in, rather than on whether it helps them be more strong-willed, creative, etc. Howard's procedure can be thought of as just such a flexibility-enhancing mood stabilizer. In some sense, he is a modern-day lobotomist, cutting out those parts of the brain which are thought to be the source of uncomfortable, unproductive feelings like sadness, depression, or anxiety. When the wider system demands its individual members adapt, no measure is too extreme. What unites Howard's patients, or his target demographic, is a desire to shortcut the hard work of integrating negative experiences into their lives, so that they can go back to living in a way that doesn't require change. They want to express flexibility rather than plasticity, and Howard is willing to help them do it.
And Howard just makes it all go away.
Clementine poignantly expresses this understandable wish to wipe away difficulties while describing her childhood to Joel.
My favorite is this ugly girl doll who I call Clementine. And I keep yelling at her, "You can't be ugly. Be pretty." It's weird. Like if I can transform her, I would magically change too.
If, as Malibu claims, trying to magically change ourselves by being eternally accommodating is a waste of our true potential, then what should we do instead? What would a fully realized plastic brain and self actually be like? In other words, if we choose not to automatically go along with the demands to be flexible, then what is the alternative we're fighting for? According to her, the plasticity of the self implies balance between the preservation of constancy and the exposure of this constancy to accidents, to the outside, to otherness in general. She adds that if we didn't explode at each transition, if we didn't destroy ourselves a bit, we could not live. To simplify, Malibu claims that to be really human, to express plasticity, is to balance the need to adapt against the need for growth and change. Yes, we all decide to make sacrifices for the sake of productivity from time to time. We might stay late at the office for one night because the boss asked us to, or skip out on movie night with friends because our teacher wants that term paper submitted by midnight. But when we become so flexible that we iron out every inefficiency in our lives, when we're so afraid of explosions that we take no risks, then we're in trouble. In other words, the Spotless Mind from the Alexander Pope poem that gives the movie its name isn't a desirable thing at all. We need our spots, traumas, heartaches, etc. in order to live full lives that have some meaning outside of our ability to satisfy demand.
How happy is the blameless vessel's lot? The world forgetting by the world forgot. Eternal sunshine of a spotless mind. Each prayer accepted, and each wish resigned.
So, what do we do? As individuals in a society that demand we stamp out the troublesome, unproductive parts of our brains in order to succeed, how should we make the best use of our brains? That is, how do we accomplish the most cyberpunk of goals that Malibu sets up in her book's opening pages, Neuronal Liberation? Her answer is simple. We ought to refuse to be flexible and exercise the explosive, creative dimensions of our brain's plasticity to the fullest extent possible. As she puts it, we should visualize the possibility of saying no to an afflicting economic, political, and mediatic culture that celebrates only the triumph of flexibility, blessing obedient individuals who have no greater merit than that of knowing how to bow their heads and smile. Joel, Clementine, and Mary take up this fight by pushing back against the erasure of their own and others' memories. That is, by being difficult and refusing to let things run smoothly for the sake of smoothness. Joel demonstrates plasticity by working with his projected image of Clementine to evade Howard and his technicians.
What if you take me somewhere else? Somewhere where I don't belong. And we hide there till morning.
And when it becomes clear that he won't be able to run forever, Joel even manages to seed a subconscious direction for his waking post-procedure self, again via his image of Clementine.
Maybe in one time.
While Joel wakes up and follows his subliminal urgings back to Clementine, Mary raids the Lacuna Inc. offices and sends out all of their files to their previous customers, in effect ruining the procedure for all of them and upsetting the smooth operation of the company.
My name is Mary Spivo.
We've met, but you don't remember me. I worked for a company you hired to have part of your memory erased.
With their painful history thus revealed to them, present-day Joel and Clementine must decide whether or not to pursue a relationship together, knowing in advance that they are likely to hurt each other very badly. Their choice is the film's ultimate example of plasticity in action.
I can't see anything that I don't like about you.
But you
right
will.
Now I can't.
But you will. You know, you will think of things, and I'll get bored with you and feel trapped, because that's what happens with me.
The flexible thing for Joel and Clementine to do in this situation would be to accept the futility of pursuing a relationship together and go their separate ways to live comfortable, productive lives, either alone or with better suited partners. Instead, they willingly blow up their chances at untroubled singledom or functional romance, opting instead for a dynamic which has been empirically proven to not work. Inherent in our plasticity is the ability to make choices of our own free will, perhaps especially when those choices don't make much sense. The film's final shot is a looping clip of Joel and Clementine playing on a snow-covered beach in Montauk, implying that this cycle is likely to play itself out again. Their relationship isn't perfect, it may not even be a good idea, but it is their choice made in defiance of flexibility and therefore an expression of the brain's plasticity. That is, its vast potential to create and destroy both itself and its environment. These neuro-rebels have done Malibu proud, and they've earned themselves a solid deep from us. But what do you think, Wisecrack? Are there ethical or practical limits to how much we can and should optimize our brains for given purposes? Have a favorite movie or TV show that explores how people relate to their own minds? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. A big thanks to our amazing patrons for supporting our channel and the podcast. Hit the subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching, guys. Peace.